Monday, January 6th on the Just Baseball Show. Happy start to the week, Jack Aram. Today we've got the Cardinals and the Mariners playing GM. We were going to do that, and then we realized that New Year's resolutions were way more fun. And we've got two signings from over the weekend that I think unbox a conversation with both. And one is, sort of kind of positive. It's also just a roster construction thing. And then the other is like, why did you do that when there were better options available? But that's all coming up. How you doing? How was the weekend? You're not watching the Dolphins. You're listening to this as the Dolphins are either in the playoffs or out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them get beat down in the first round of the playoffs enough times in my lifetime where, like, if they make it, cool. We'll just run the sequence back again. If they don't make it, then
Yeah.
spare me that extra week of anticipation for disappointment. I'm that team. They're not Marlins territory in terms of like my not caring, but they're getting there. And then the Miami Heat, the one team I probably care the most about. You know, has their best player just deciding to quit. So, it's how it goes right now in South Florida sports. But the Panthers, I wish I cared more about hockey. They're
The
good-ish.
Ice
Yeah,
Cats. I love
yeah,
that. Yeah, not the first time Jimmy has mandated his way out of a situation, although I love him and we had that Derrick Rose thing go on. So I miss
yeah.
Jimmy in a Bulls uniform. It would be kind of nice if he'd
Take him
come back.
back. He said he'll play anywhere else, so he'd be
Yeah.
happy to go back to Chicago.
I queue up. I'm coming home, man. Let's talk about Charlie Morton here. And this was the one that made me scratch my head. Charlie Morton signed a 1 year deal with the Baltimore Orioles over the weekend for $15 million. And that means that Baltimore has addressed their ravaged starting rotation with $28 million worth of a 41-year-old Charlie Morton and a 34-year-old, 35-year-old
35.
35-year-old Tomoyuki Sugano for $13 million.
Yep.
So, my overarching thought is if you're running out an opening day rotation in Baltimore of Grayson, Eflin, Morton, Dean Kramer, Tomoyuki Sugano, and maybe Trevor Rogers, your goal's not to win the World Series. You've shown your hand at this point.
Yeah. Well, the funny part too is they said they're not done. Like they may want to add more starting pitching help, which is just bizarre to me because then then why did you trade for Trevor Rogers and in the last offseason and why would you sign a Shigano if you still planned on going to get a Charlie Morton and then you still plan on going to get a higher impact arm presumably when you also have Cade Povich, who looked like he could be a back end of the rotation arm. I understand being hesitant on McDermott because of the command and stuff like that. So
Sure.
like not, penciling him in there. But I thought Cade Povich showed enough to say, okay, that's a back end of the rotation option,
Yeah.
especially if I could consolidate the 13 and the 15 that, as you just mentioned, went to Morton and to Shigano. Instead, I'd rather give Cade Povich a spot in the minimum, consolidate those two, and pay a higher AAV, give Walker Bueller more money, and to the point, even if he wanted to be in Boston, a little
Yeah.
bit extra so he can't refuse it or crazy incentives. Or again, just be comfortable going towards a multi-year deal. But from an AAV perspective, it would set them up just fine this year. I don't really understand it. But at the end of the day, it does make them a little bit better, right? It does give them
Yeah.
another decent option in that rotation. But they didn't need another back end starter. They need somebody that can grab the ball in game one or two of a postseason series
Yeah.
and match the opponent.
Yeah. I don't love this rotation as we get into the postseason. I'm not breaking any news there because you've got Charlie Morton getting the ball game three. And, you've got Grayson, who you hope takes a step to being a game one starter in the postseason. And I love that. Like, I'm all for giving Grayson every opportunity to take on a number one role in a starting rotation because I do think he's that good. But we got to see him be healthy over the course of a full year, and we got to see him be successful over the course of a full year. Eflin is one of the more underrated pitchers in baseball over the last several seasons. And they went and got Eflin, and Eflin was pretty good for them after the deadline. But like pretty good is not winning a World Series, and we're talking about a team that has Gunnar Henderson coming off of a 9 WAR season, and Adley Rutschman coming off of his worst year, which is a 3.5 win season, and I fully expect him to get back to a 4.5, 5 win season behind the plate. You have this offensive firepower, And you're running out of time with, a Cedric Mullins in there. And I know that Mullins is not a focal point, but, like all of a sudden clock's ticking and you go with a 41-year-old when the clock starts to tick, and you go with a 35-year-old that was striking out like 6 per 9 in Japan when the clock starts to tick. Like I mentioned last week, Bueller made a lot more sense than this duo. I think, even instead of a Shugano, like a Verlander, just because you're saying, hey, you know what? We're adding a guy that's been an all time great. I don't know what he still has, but like, let's see if he can do it here with a young, exciting team, and maybe he finds that fountain of youth. There were so many other options than a 41-year-old that's going to throw 65% curveballs in 2025. And
Yeah.
no disrespect to Charlie Morton because, he was good when he was in his upper 30s, even 40 years old with Atlanta. But I mean, he's kind of a one trick pony right now. And then Shugano, there's a chance he just can't get an out
Yeah.
some nights.
Yeah, I mean, very possible. Like it's very possible the stuff's just not good enough to survive as a five starter, and he ends up being more of a long man. So I think they see some things that they hope and feel confident that they can unlock, and I can see that there's components of the arsenal there, but I don't think that you have much more upside than a solid five starter there, maybe a fringe four. So I'm wondering who kind of packs that punch for you. Would have loved a Mania, as we've talked about. Would have loved something else. They do sign a pitcher, but it's funny, like this apprehensive or the apprehension that they have, and just doing all of these smaller deals. There's no such thing as a small deal anymore, right? It's just
No.
smaller in relation. They add up, and you're still spending a fair amount of money. I understand it's not long-term commitments, but I just don't understand it. We're gonna like add up the last couple years, right? The 13 million last year to Corbin to Craig Kimbrell,
Yeah.
and then you also add now the 13 to Shigano. That's a 2 year, $26 million deal. Would have rather done something else. So like you can go 1 year by 1 year by 1 year, but if you whiff on 1 year deals for three consecutive deal years, how is that any different than whiffing on a 3 year deal?
Right.
I don't really understand that. So. I think Mike Elias and his just kind of caution and consistent caution, I think has resulted in the Orioles. I wouldn't say purgatory because there's such a good offensive core, but kind
Yep.
of being stuck in this step before being in the elite World Series contender territory. Like they're stuck in that top of the tier two.
Yep.
And that's a frustrating thing, I think, for fans because they've waited so long for this team to be competitive. So many of these prospects have actually turned into exciting young players,
Yep.
and they're just not pushing across the finish line here.
Four of their five most expensive players have come this offseason. And when you add those four up, it's $53 million. You spent $53 million on the 2025 season for Tyler O'Neill, Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Shugano, and Gary Sanchez, who is a backup catcher slash DH. There are better ways to spend $53 million for one
Yeah.
season.
And Tyler O'Neill, like, I mean, that's the craziest part
It could
is we
blow up in
have
their
this
face, man. He could play 50 games.
we have this risk averse team
Yeah.
or this risk averse front office, and
It's
then they sign
Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez.
you sign the riskiest free agent I think that there was. But and I think O'Neill is because you legitimately have a guy that strikes out north of 30% of the time against righties and is hurt all the time. Yeah, he has a lot of, exciting ability when he's healthy, and we saw that last year. But that's the craziest part is risk averse, but then we're going to go for the riskiest bat on a multi-year deal. It's really interesting stuff, and I really do. I really am impressed by a lot of the things that the Orioles front office has done and what Mike Elias has done, but I think he's got to be on like fraud watch a little bit this year. I think we got to put him like on the he's not on the hot seat for fraud watch, but I think it's starting to heat up. And I think how this year goes, we'll start to generate some more conversation about Mike Elias and the conversation that we have about Heim Bloom, right? There's a difference between being able to build a farm system
Yeah.
and a controllable young core, and then there's the other step, which is addressing your needs once you're ready to compete and how you push this team forward to be, a World Series contender.
Yep.
Is Mike Elias more in the Heim Bloom territory, or is he, a front office guy that can win World Series? Like, and that's where I'm interested to find out.
I was ready to bring that name up too because it does feel pretty similar. The Heim Bloom conversation now, and Bloom has benefited from hindsight because he drafted Roman, because he drafted a Christian Campbell. Like he got all these guys that are the best prospects in the Red Sox organization. And then Craig Breslow used a lot of those pieces. Now, granted, Breslow did draft Braden Montgomery, but he used a Kyle Teal and he used a Mydroth and he used a Wilkeman to go get Garrett Crochet. So I think Heim Bloom is benefiting from being gone now. And we're like, oh, those guys that he got are really good. But we talk about guys that are very good at prospect identification and prospect development. And, like the conversation stops with Eric Neander and Matt Arnold because that's all they're supposed to do. They're not swimming in an ocean. They're swimming in a kiddie pool financially. They cannot make big league moves to complement the prospect development and the prospect maturation when they turn into controllable pieces. In Baltimore and Boston, that conversation doesn't stop. Like, yes, that's really important, but then you need to find like big league pieces to complement those pre-arb players that you view as your stars or superstars. So that's kind of the burden of being in a Baltimore where they are going to sell it out if you're really good. And
Yep.
Camden Yards is electric when that team is right. And they've got is David Rubenstein, is he private equity? I think he is.
Yes, he's
Like
private equity.
they've got a private equity guy that's ready to like ball out to make the Orioles a winner. So the conversation can't stop with, oh, this guy's really good at prospect identification and player development. Like
Yeah.
you have to be a little bit more than that if you're in a Baltimore, if you're in a Boston.
Well, and the irony is though the big free agent contract, I think it was like the biggest that the Rays had given out, was Zach Eflin, which ended up being an absolute. At the time, everyone was like, "Whoa, that's where the Rays are going to spend. That's where they're going to spend." But it ended up being a really good identification and a good signing, and that's a contract that Michael Elias willingly piggybacked on and ended up taking on,
Yep.
and gave up some prospects for. So like that's the funniest part about the whole thing.
Yep, no doubt. So yeah, it was just kind of like it was a signing that would you call it a head scratcher, the Morton thing?
It just was. Yeah, not total head scratcher, just it's just kind of I don't even know what I would call it. I guess like it's just nothing surprises me anymore. It's kind of what I expect at this point.
I think it was a sigh. It was a
It
signing that
was a
evoked a
sigh. Yeah,
sigh.
it's just like a.
Okay.
My only reaction. I was like, just Michael Elias save some back end of the rotation arms for the rest of the league. Like it's like he's trying to stockpile them.
Yeah, but if they're all going to cost $15 million, they're not going to get signed. Like it's either okay, you wait and you get four from somebody else, or you get 15 from Baltimore, and that's what happened with Charlie Morton. Let's go to a guy that is, I think, what about 13 in total? Hyeseong Kim with the good old 3+2 deal. It's a 3-year deal, $12.5 million. It has a 2-year club option, so the Dodgers can exercise two for an additional 9.5. This is a very cheap long-term deal if it turns into a 5-year deal for Hyeseong Kim, who was the prized bat on the international free agent market,
By
KBO or
default.
NPB by default. I think he was the only one. This is no Jung Hoo Lee.
No.
This is no Munetaka Murakami when he comes over. This created this roster question for me where it's like, okay, does he make Lux expendable or are they going to DFA Chris Taylor? It was just a very weird deal for the Dodgers to throw more money at a guy that might play 90 games.
Yeah, I think this is more of like a long-term vision thing, like going into next year and the year after that, right? Like Miguel Rojas is getting quite old, and
Yeah.
that role it feels like Hyeseong Kim could very well fill this year potentially if he's banged up because Rojas is always dealing with injury, or the year after that. You figured whether they keep Lux this year or not. Feels like within the next couple years he's probably gone, so that's another area where you have that insurance policy, but. I think for the Dodgers, they just saw an opportunity to grab a player that will probably be that next infield utility guy for them, and for pretty cheap. And the fact that it probably became clear to them that he was more than willing to go to LA and specifically LA, not Anaheim, because apparently the reports were that Anaheim, the LA Angels offered more.
Yeah.
And some other teams offered a little bit more, and he took a little bit less to play for the Dodgers. So it, the thing with him is it's going to be a process. And full full disclosure, like I didn't love the bat. I think he's fast and I don't think he is really fast. He's a good defender at second base. He can get by at shortstop and play a decent shortstop. He's going to make a lot of contact, but I don't even think he's as good offensively as Hyeseong Kim. So if you think about that, it's going to be like a 85 WRC plus, something around that as he gets acclimated. That's fine for a speedy bench piece.
Yeah,
And then you hope that in year two, he gets closer to that league average bat,
yeah,
or then year three, he gets closer to that league average bat. So I feel like for the Dodgers, they are kind of looking at this as time for him to develop. Then in year two, when we have some more clarity, when Rojas is gone, that's where we'll expect you to kind of fill in a role more specifically.
yeah. I was texting with Lyle and TJ, the Marine Layer pod. Go listen to that if you guys are Seattle Mariners fans in the slightest or in the Seattle area. And I was texting with them because he was a candidate to be signed for cheap to be an everyday second baseman. And Lyle was pretty much saying like, I'm good on that. I'm
Yeah.
very fine that we passed up on that. He was not an everyday second baseman. So anybody that says, oh, this is the second baseman for the LA Dodgers, that's not going to be the case. And I saw Fabian Ardaya, I think, tweeted out a thought from Brandon Gomes, the Dodger GM, saying, our plan is Mookie at short, Lux at second, and Hyeseong Kim fills this super utility role. And then every reply was either A, I'm calling BS on the Lux thing, or B, when are we DFAing Chris Taylor then? And that is the roster question, but it feels more like a Taylor replacement when Taylor does
Yeah.
come off the books. And you mentioned Miguel Rojas, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And if you were, I'm harsh on Gavin Lux, even though he had the big second half. There's almost no chance Sung Kim would be able to match what Gavin Lux can give you offensively, right? So, why would you do that in the name of a little bit better defense and speed? I don't really get that yet. So that's why I do think there's a decent chance that they actually don't move Gavin Lux, and it gives you just a better insurance policy, things like that. But yeah, I really see it more as I don't know if we're going to do this Chris Taylor experience anymore, and we might just eat the money at this point because he still gives you that speed, and again, they need that throughout that lineup. I think they could use a bench guy that can run a little bit and give them another just dynamic player because they are kind of stuck with some of their guys in certain spots, and they kind of lack some of that versatility. I like it from that perspective, but I do feel like this year they're not really expecting him to do much other than be a bench player.
No, and I was expecting Freeland to be that guy, to be honest with you. Like once
Yeah.
they decided to get rid of Chris Taylor, but it sucks to be a prospect with the LA Dodgers, I guess, much like the New York Yankees for the last decade or so. Sucked to be a prospect with the Yankees because you're getting traded or you're never playing. With the Dodgers, I mean, is Dalton Rushing going to get an AB in
Ugh.
25? Is Freeland going to get an AB in 25? Looks like hell no.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It may also afford them the comfort of trading an Alex Freeland because if you trade Alex Freeland, who's borderline top 100 guy now, and a
Yeah.
lot of teams would have a ton of interest in him, put up great numbers in the upper minor, switch hitter, can stick it short. If you trade that guy and you don't have a Hyeseong Kim there, and someone goes down, Lux goes down,
You're
and
shitting.
or Rojas goes down, you're like, damn it, what did we do? You're
Yeah.
scrambling a little bit. So
Yeah.
now, if the opportunity comes, you want to go make a trade, you could probably feel a little bit more comfortable moving in Alex Freeland, who any team that's selling would love to have Alex Freeland
Yeah.
as a key part of a package.
Or could you move a Lux still and elevate Freeland to that role?
It's very possible as well if they really believe in him.
Yeah, there we go. So we are going to get into the Cardinals and Mariners. There might be a Gavin Lux conversation a little bit later on in this episode, but stay tuned. Before that, quick break. One more thing, real quick, before we get to the Cardinals. I forgot to mention that the corresponding move for the Dodgers signing Hyeseong Kim was DFAing Diego Cartaya, the catcher, who was a top 20 prospect in baseball 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, top 30.
It was it 3 years ago, maybe?
I
There was a
thought it
point in
was
time where people really, 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 really liked him.
I thought it was going into the 2023 season. Diego Cartaya as he got off to as strong a start in the lower levels as we've seen from a catcher in a very long time, and it continued through high A, and then he got to double A, and he hit an absolute wall. DFA'd at a young 23 years old. In 2021, 31 games had 10 bombs. In 2022, split the year between low A and high A, had an 892 OPS with 22 bombs in 95 games. And then 2023, a 650 OPS in 24, a 690 OPS between double A in AAA. You called your shot on this one. I saw your reply to my tweet where I said I would never ever have expected you. Um, I would have never believed somebody if they told me that Diego Cartaya was going to get DFA'd pre-debut. And you said episode 14 of the call up. It was a great interview with Joey Weimer, episode 14 of the
I
call up.
just gave a random
Yeah, I went
arbitrary.
back to check receipts, but you know what? You were one of the early movers where it's like, I don't know if this works, man. But that had to still be shocking that he gets DFA'd before he even gets a big league plate appearance.
That's so funny. No, I definitely never would have thought he'd get DFA'd.
Yeah,
It's wild though. That's funny that was an interview with Joey Weimer. Man, that's 300 and something episodes ago.
I know.
But no, the crazy thing is, and with him, you know, I think he was just mature beyond his years. And that's something we talked about on the call up, where sometimes there's these players that are ahead of their years and you can get really excited about what they can be as teenage prospects. It's like, oh, well, if he's this when he's 17 or 18, what's he going to be when he's 21 or 22? But sometimes it's if he's this when he's 17 or 18 and there's not much more room for growth, is this going to work when he's 21 or 22? And that was always the big concern for me. Like the 2022 season where the numbers were fantastic and he's thrusted into the top 30, in prospect lists as, an advanced 20-year-old feasting or 19/20-year-old feasting on low A, high A competition. He was swinging and missing a lot. He did not have the most impressive exit velocities in the world, but was pulling the ball in the air with decent consistency and playing in some good hitter friendly environments. And the body was like kind of backing up, and he wasn't playing as well defensively. Kind of lost some of that agility, and that's where I got concerned because I'm like, it gets a little bit harder to pull the ball in the air consistently against better pitching, and if you already have some whiff issues, that's going to be even harder to do. And then that's what ended up unfortunately getting exposed in double A, which is generally where that's going to get exposed, right? Yeah, you can pull the ball in the air, but if you don't have that like Isaac Paredes ability to manipulate the barrel, you need big EVs, and his EVs were never plus. So, like he's still young, and hopefully he can get an opportunity to try to improve his stock elsewhere. But I think with the defense kind of backing up a little bit too, it's hard to find that clear cut value for him now. He's kind of a tweener.
Yeah. Angel, A, Blue Jay, or Red Sox? Where is he? Those are my big four for him getting claimed.
Angel, dude, the Angels are going to take any failed prospect,
I
any
think so.
any any prospect that didn't work out.
The other one that jumps out is like they could just Washington could claim him and just slap him in Rochester, and that could be kind of fun. But I do think that he screams Angel in the DFA process. Or Tampa's like, you know what? We need catching depth in Durham. Hop
I
over
could see
there with
Tampa too.
Eloy Jimenez.
Oh, that'd be a fun team.
That would be good. But let's get into the St. Louis Cardinals now. The Cardinals, this is a very unique set of circumstances here because for the first time ever, they want to operate like a small market team. And they were 16th in team OPS. They were 22nd in runs scored. They were 20th in starter ERA. They were 7th in bullpen ERA. They were just mediocre to below average all around last year. They did finish in the middle of the pack in the National League Central. That's because it was not a very good division whatsoever. Their final number in 2024 was $183 million. Their estimate in 2025 is $160.2 million. I'll walk you through the transactions real quick, and then, Aram, you have some color that you want to fill in there on what the Cardinals are trying to do this offseason. They declined club options on Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, and Keenan Middleton. They lost Paul Goldschmidt, Andrew Kittredge, and Matt Carpenter to free agency. They non-tendered former Blue Jay GOAT Adam Kloffenstein. And they signed Ryan Valade, Jose Barrero, and relief pitcher Michael Gomez to minor league deals. They claimed Roddery Munoz off waivers from the Marlins. That's it to this point. It's going to be pretty freaking boring, isn't it?
Yep, yeah, and I think it's just going to be figuring out ways to trim payroll and probably clear the runway for some of their younger guys, which that part they should definitely do. Uh, but yeah, it's interesting because two of the guys that they want to move that are commanding the most money possess no trade clauses. And apparently Sonny Gray, enacted his at some point this offseason. And we know Nolan Arenado did, and more on that later because um, he may have played himself.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like Sonny Gray has no interest from everything I've read, whether it's from Katie Wu, The Athletic, or MLB.com articles. Sonny Gray wanted the no trade clause for a reason. He's 35 years old. He has a family and kids, and he doesn't want to move them again because he's I think they're set up close to where he lives with his family. If I'm not mistaken, it's like in the Tennessee area or whatever.
Gotcha.
Whatever it is, makes sense. He does not want to just upend again and do that. And I think that was a big part of why he has no trade clause in there. So
Yep.
he's probably not going anywhere. Nolan Arenado is willing to waive it, and what they've said is, they realize it's best for both parties. But Arenado, he enacted the no trade clause when that trade was agreed upon with the Astros, and the Astros said, "Hey, we're not going to wait around, man." And so they pivoted days later and signed Christian Walker. So that ship's probably sailed.
Yep.
And Arenado cited the reason being, "Hey, I want to see what other options are out there." Well, great. There goes one of your best options, and there may not be that many other teams that are willing to take on the majority of the money. Remember, the Cardinals don't like to eat money.
Right.
They don't like to do it because it's just something that they've never really had to do historically. So why would you do it now when you're trying to trim payroll? You'd almost be better off just keeping him there and optically just having things be a little bit better. So
Yep.
I don't think there's a lot of teams that are lining up to take on the majority of Nolan Arenado's contract now. And one of the few that was, he vetoed the trade to,
Yeah.
and now the market is kind of dried up for him.
Who would be on the short list of teams that are willing to take on Arenado at that money? I think the Yankees would be willing to do it. I think the Red Sox would still be willing to do it. I don't know how in they are on Bregman. I got to figure out who's in on Bregman. It seems like Detroit and Toronto at this point, but I can't figure out if Boston is or isn't.
I don't know. It's weird, but I think Bregman, the best fit for Bregman would be Boston with that monster
I think
in
so.
left field.
And the worst fit would be Detroit. And it seems like they are the clear cut front runner.
Yeah, which is crazy. I think that is the worst fit. But I would love to see Detroit, add and
Yeah.
keep adding. But yeah, for his spray and the way that he produces does not seem like the best fit.
No.
The Angels, man, and it's one of the teams that he said he would, veto or he would waive the no trade
Yeah.
clause on.
He's from there. He went
He's
to
from
El
there.
Toro High School, which I think is in the Anaheim area. It's a little inland California. So I get it.
I get it. And you know what? If you're going to play on a team that's probably not going to compete for a World Series in St. Louis, or a team that's probably not going to compete for a World Series in your hometown, probably rather do the latter. And at
Yep.
least the one in the latter is going to try weirdly to do it and
Yeah.
has, when healthy, one of the best players on the planet, Mike Trout. And, you can just talk yourself into a little bit more excitement there.
Yeah.
But I mean, on paper, I think you could argue that the Cardinals are still better,
Yeah.
but that's not the point there, I guess. I think there's a real scenario where, yeah, I think the Yankees, it could make sense, and he's good friends with Paul Goldschmidt, and they can go there together and everything like that. But I don't think the Yankees are going to take on the majority of the money with where they're at financially and how much they have committed. It's just probably not worth it, right? I feel like the list of teams that would be willing to do it is pretty short, like up to the amount that the Cardinals wanted. And I think the Angels are probably the best and most likely option to take on all but $5 million, which is what the Astros had agreed upon.
That's going to be so sad if we trade Nolan Arenado to the Angels. But I'm with you. It seems like the most realistic landing spot. If the Yankees were to take on the overwhelming majority of the money or all of the money for Nolan, I mean, Cardinals fans are going to be really pissed with the prospect return because it's
Yep.
going to be nothing. And
Yep.
that sucks that Nolan is a net even at this point with that money. I don't want to call him a net negative because he's a Hall of Famer and he is one of my all time favorites to watch. I know he's one of your all time favorites to
Hmm.
watch. So like this is a guy that I feel like has surpassed the idea of net negative out of respect alone. And there would be a lot of number 28 jerseys or whatever number he can wear in New York that would sell. But at the end of the day, it's a diminished version of Nolan Arenado. So I would love to figure out a way to get him on the Yankees in this exercise, but we can move him to LA. I want to save him for a little bit. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
just see where everybody else goes?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. And I think, the exercise, even though this is Cardinals and Mariners, is what else could the Yankees do to address third? Now I don't think you're going to keep Jazz there. I think it's clear Jazz is going to play second now that Glaber's gone.
Yeah.
Are you going to put your trust into DJ LeMahieu
No,
again
I
here?
would never.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. So I think the Yankees still are a great option because as it stands now, what else would they do?
Yohan
I guess.
Moncada. One
Yeah,
year deal for
God.
Moncada.
Like, so I am cool sending him to the Yankees. I just thought there's a very real scenario where the Angels, who have not been as lively in terms of being on the market, apparently with them, I think that other teams have checked in more.
Yeah,
If nothing's really happening, it just seems so Angels to say, "Hey, you know what? We'll take them."
yeah.
And knowing that you have Christian Moore on the way to play
Hmm.
second base, and that you can maybe trade Luis Rengifo, that would offset $9 million anyways. It would make some sense for them. They could probably afford to take on the majority of the money, get a sneaky return for Rengifo, and then Rendon in the meantime, you can just hope he holds it down for a little bit, see what happens with him at second base. And if he doesn't, then Christian Moore's up ready to go whenever you want to do it. But I think Yankees will be a lot better.
I kind of just want to like get him off the books, but again, we'll wait a little bit, and that is how obviously you'll shed bulk of money. Nolan Arenado in 2025 is owed 32, owed 27 in 2026, and owed 15 in 2027. So thankfully, it's a bit more front loaded, but that's still a ton of money that you got to pay up front for a Nolan Arenado in the RSN era of Major League Baseball, which
Wait,
has
it's
carried.
it's 20 it's 27 next year?
Fangraphs has 32, 27, 15 for the final 3 years.
I think is that the total number or is that because I'm looking at Spa Track and they've got 21
30.
in 2025, 16 in 2026, and 15 in 2027.
I have no idea where the extra money would come from on Fangraphs then.
Is it the part that the Rockies paid down?
Maybe. Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
Rockies are paying all, well, no, but I don't think they've paid down since 2021. I don't know what the situation is
When
then.
in doubt, spot track. Like, let's
Yeah.
just go with the spot track number. So it's a little bit better than
Yeah.
what
That's what I was
Fangraphs
saying. I
has.
never thought it was that bad. Like, I never thought the money was that bad.
Yeah.
21 million, then 16, then 15 just doesn't seem like that bad of a deal, to be honest. Even I understand that it's 3 years, a guy that is on the decline to a degree here, but it's not that bad for Nolan Arenado.
No, not at all. So let's go with the spot track number so you clear up, over $20 million for this coming year. I do want to spend on one thing, and I want you to explain what it is, and then I'll lay out the math. What is a traject machine?
A traject machine is the like super advanced pitching machine that was created that essentially has the screen where you can see a whatever pitcher you want thrown to you, but it also loads in like the TrackMan data and can like somewhat closely duplicate the arsenal of the pitchers that you would be facing, or just want to simulate facing with the mechanics and everything. It's pretty wild.
It is the closest thing to the F1 simulator that everybody sees. You know how those guys get in the pods and they can essentially like race on the track before they actually get on the track in the actual car. It's the closest thing that we have in baseball where you
Yep.
can mimic that and you can see a pitcher before you see him that given night. They are emphasizing in 2025 and 2026 player development. How do you do that? By getting guys focused reps. How do you get guys focused reps offensively? A traject machine. I looked into pricing for a traject machine.
Are they half a mil?
I went to traject.com. It's about $180,000 a year.
And I think with the machine and everything, I think you're all in at like 300,000 or no?
300. So my all-in pricing that I saw was you lease it for about $15,000 a month, but you have to agree to a 3-year lease.
There
So
you go. Okay,
that
that
comes
makes
out
sense.
that comes out to $180,000 a year. I want one in St. Louis, Memphis, the AAA affiliate, Springfield, the AA affiliate, Peoria, and then I want one in Jupiter as well. So I want one
That's
at
too many
every
traject
affiliate.
machines.
5 times 180 is $900,000 a year. Times three, a 3-year, $2.7 million deal with Traject. Are they not going to do that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you get two at maximum
So St. Louis and Jupiter.
in Memphis. Yeah.
Oh, Memphis. You think
Yeah.
AAA before the complex?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so St. Louis and Memphis. All right, so that cuts it. What in 180 times two is 360 times three is part of a 3-year lease. It would be 1.08, 3 years,
Yeah.
$1.08 million dollars
With Traject. Yeah.
with Traject.
I mean,
Okay.
they're already crying poor, so I don't think they're doing much more than that.
Are we willing to spend that? I think we are.
We should be.
Okay. So
Heim Bloom
we
is.
we have that deal with Traject. We've got a Traject machine in St. Louis and Memphis. So there you go. That solves your player development thing. They're going to be awesome now. Um, in terms of other people you're willing to move, I think the clear cut one is Helsley, and then I think
Yeah.
the other
I mean,
clear cut
even though they say they're not, like
they have to
they have to.
have to. He's 8.1 in his final year of control. I think the other easy one to move that could get you a pretty darn good return is Eric Fetty
Yep.
at one
No
for
brainer.
7.5.
No brainer.
So
So
we
those are the two. And like, yeah, of course they'd love to move Michaelis. I've seen Steven Matz. No one's. I don't think
no one
anyone's
wants
taking those
those
deals on.
guys.
And you're not gonna if you're not gonna pay them down. Like those are the two where I could see them paying it down. But if it's pay that down and get no return, or trade Fetty and Helsley and get a good return,
Yeah,
and then maybe halfway through the season Matz is throwing pretty well, then you can dump him then and actually maybe get something.
yeah,
I'd rather do that. So I think you from that lens alone, with Sonny Gray not being able to be moved now, and there's some concern that Arenado may even be more difficult, or you may not get as much of the money, taken on as you thought. I think you almost have to move Ryan Helsley. And I saw that they were in the market. There were some reports like they're in the market for a high leverage arm. To me, that was more, I think, as a potential replacement to Helsley than to say, oh, we need a complement to Helsley. Like, why would you want that when
no,
you're in a trimming payroll development year? It doesn't make any sense. So
no.
I think that was mostly posturing, and I think he should absolutely be gone.
Do you have any fits you like for Helsley?
A few.
Yeah,
Um, but then the top one for me is the Red Sox.
yeah.
That bullpen still needs to be addressed. And if I'm Heim Bloom, if I'm trying to maximize a prospect return, why not from a farm system that I know better than
Yeah.
any other system in Major League Baseball by a lot?
Yeah. The dream for me of Arenado and Helsley being a package deal is still alive to Boston, but I know it's not going to happen. Helsley to Boston makes a lot of sense. The only other team that jumped out to me that I was like, yes, this is perfect is Texas. I think Helsley could be very good in Texas.
Yeah, if they have the bandwidth to take on any more money, I could. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
that'd be a
think they
good fit.
can free it up a little bit with some big league money. Like Ezekiel Duran on that roster is a sitting duck. He
Yeah.
has no time there. So I thought Duran and a decent prospect for Helsley could make some sense because it is expensive for a reliever at $8 million.
So I was going to ask you, like, I was trying to figure out exactly what the value is there because I'm thinking about what Connor Scott, what Tanner Scott brought in. What Tanner Scott brought in was pretty significant for the Marlins, and that was a rental, right? I mean, they got
Yeah,
Robbie Snelling, they got Graham Pauley, they got Adam Major, they got another piece too. Like, what is a full year of Helsley at 8 million and change? What does that get you if you're the Cardinals? Like, are you getting a top 100 or borderline top 100 prospect?
probably that in a one for one swap. But like what I looked at was Helsley to Texas for Ezekiel Duran and Dylan Dreiling. So Dreiling is a guy that was an early round pick, but not a first round pick by any measure. I think he was what, third or fourth. He was the most outstanding player of the College World Series. Duran is a guy that has proven to be an okay big leaguer, but has had flaws exposed at the major league level. You mentioned Snelling and Major and Pauly. All those guys had flaws exposed in pro ball in 2024. So it's not like they were getting anybody that was a slam dunk, top 60 prospect in baseball for one of the best relievers in baseball.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I wonder maybe there is an interest in a Duran, or is there a redundancy in a Duran when you have Thomas Ajazi and you're just trying to figure out kind of which of these young guys are going to stick.
Yeah.
But what if they don't? What if Sajazi struggles? Then you need
Right.
another guy to fill that role potentially. So
Right.
I could see that. I had him going to the Red Sox for more upside guys that are further off.
Yeah.
Miguel Bleis, who exactly what you talked about here, though. I feel like if I'm trading a reliever and it's a somewhat rental or 1 year reliever, I'm going to try to buy low on some prospects that, I still believe in. And I
Yeah.
think that's what the Marlins did with the Tanner Scott rental. Because, yeah, like you said, you could do a 1-for-1 with a guy that's maybe capped, or you can shoot for the fences and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I thought Miguel Bleis and Mr. Garcia, John
Oh,
Stinks.
he has an X in his name. Janixton Garcia.
It's
Yeah,
JOS. Sorry, JHOSTYNXON. Justinson.
I think they call him Password. So let's call him Password. Password
Is that
Garcia.
that's his nickname, right? His
I think his
password.
nickname is Password, which is
That's
awesome.
unreal, by the way. That's an unreal unreal nickname. Added to the 40 as well. And like I think part of that almost hurts his value a little because he's a great prospect and really exciting. I think what he did this past year, higher floor is like a bat that has shined through, but you got to carry him on the 40 for presumably another 2 years or at
And
least
you got to
another
start
year and a
blowing
half.
options. Like all of a sudden, you bring him up and he's got one option remaining because they have to option him this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So like there's those wrinkles where I just think it's maybe they'll be willing to open that 40-man spot, but he also had a sick year. He hit 280 between high A and double A, 286, 356, 536. Majority of that damage was done in high A, but he chases a lot. There's some like small warts to the profile. And then Blyce, before Red Sox fans say, "Oh, we're not trading Blaze." Look at the numbers for the last couple of years. Like, how long are we going to do this? Like, oh, he could be a superstar. He became such a buzzy name. I do think he's super talented. I'm sure Heim Bloom thinks he's super talented. I also think he's a change of scenery candidate. It just has not fully come together for him there in Boston at the lower level. Still extremely young, monster power potential, super toolsy, great shot to take.
Yeah.
But like Red Sox fans, there's been so many times like, oh, we're not moving Blaze, whatever. Come on.
Yeah.
He's nowhere near the top of that farm system anymore. He's very good get for the Cardinals for a reliever, and then you get a higher floor guy. But is that too much for 1 year of a guy that I do think like is one of the best relievers in baseball?
Yeah, he led the National League in saves last year, and he's very good. There's a chance that he gives you 70 innings at a sub 2 ERA this year and leads the
And then you're
American League in
and
saves.
then you're QOing him and you're getting a draft pick.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too. I don't, that's
Yeah.
why I actually don't think it's too
And
much.
and the Red Sox are starving for a guy at the back of that bullpen. And your options on the free agent market right now are guys that are going to cost you 2x what you're getting Helsley for. So yeah, I would give up some prospects to, only pay a guy $8 million to be a borderline elite closer or an all-star caliber closer. I think it's totally worth it. So let's do it. Blyce and Password for Ryan Helsley. And St. Louis gets out of about $8 million there.
Yep. I
Cool.
like that.
Fetty, I think there's a team that is a slam dunk here. And I know that this team's Twitter subset is all over him. Cleveland wants Fetty bad. Fetty fits Cleveland perfectly. What have we talked about? They need innings so bad. Fetty's already a guardian in my mind. How do we get him to Cleveland?
I sent him
That's
to Atlanta, which is funny, but
really
I didn't
okay.
even think about Cleveland. So I like that. Let's hear this.
So I've got Fetty going to Cleveland for Angel Martinez, who can play infield, outfield, switch hitter, and a legit, like I think a legit prospect that can do a bit of everything. CJ Kafis and a lottery ticket.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if you're the Cardinals, would you rather have a big leaguer, like a young, controllable big leaguer, or would you rather have lower level prospects with more upside?
I think given the roster right now, like it doesn't seem like they're going to move Nootbaar. You already have Walker's clock ticking. You already have Wynn's clock ticking, and you're paying Wilson Contreras still. Ivan Herrera is, I think, in year two when it comes to his service time at this point. Like I feel like they'd be interested in getting a guy like Angel Martinez who has 6 years of control left.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it could afford them the ability to then move later this year, some other guys potentially. Maybe they
Yeah,
finally do move a Brendan Donovan. Maybe they do move a new bar and Martinez could play, I think, left too. Like if they wanted to, I think he could go play there.
play everywhere.
Yeah, he could legitimately do everything. Um, I don't hate that at all. I just it's 1 year of Fetty though. Are you giving up on Hel Martinez for 1 year of Fetty?
I think you are. Yeah, and Kafis doesn't have a spot.
No, Kfis is the most blocked, and I know like fans may say, "Oh, that's a lot to give up." Kafis stood on his head. Underlying batted ball data is not the best.
Yeah.
Like he was kind of out kicking his coverage there a little bit, but he's a solid player, and I think definitely an intriguing bat to add. But I think for 1 year of Eric Fetty, like Angel Martinez and a lotto ticket may be enough.
You think so? I'm looking at this like, is Cleveland gonna move Lane Thomas? I know they have interest in moving him, but I'm looking at everywhere on this roster, and I'm trying to pluck the space that Angel Martinez will be a starter in the next 2, 3 years, and I just can't
Well,
find it.
and dude, and Angel Hanao is on
Yeah,
a like he is on a fast track like he is mowing everybody down in his way, I think, to being like the future, like the middle infield prospect that we how many times do we do this with the Guardians? Like, oh, this guy is the switch hitting middle infielder that, gets the Lindor comps. Like
yeah,
we've done it a million times. Angel Hanao, I'm not saying he shouldn't get, no one should get Lindor comps. We got to stop comparing every switch hitting middle infielder to Lindor, by the way. But this is the guy, I think, Hanau, that is actually going to break through and be that everyday
yeah,
middle infielder for the Guardians. Whereas, I think a lot of these guys, like, they come up a little bit short
yeah,
because they're high floor, and we just see the ceiling kind of limited, and they just kind of fill a role like Brian Roquillo, who did take a good step forward,
yeah.
and and looks like he could be solid. But Hanau, I think, can be like an above average regular for a long time. And after what he did in high A last year, looking like he can potentially fly through the minors pretty quickly, that would make me a little bit more comfortable in moving in on Angel Martinez. And don't get jaded on the 2024 numbers. They had this guy playing center field, even though he'd barely ever played it at the big league level. He was
Yeah.
playing all over as a switch hitter who, I looked great in AAA. You saw him. Like, it just in the big leagues, it was an adjustment while adjusting to a bunch of different spots.
Yeah.
To get Angel Martinez in this deal, I do think would be a good get for the Cardinals. And honestly, like, they want to give Nolan Gorman a bunch of ABs at the hot corner, like if they move Arenado, which I get, but I wouldn't go all in on that. Like, I would want a contingency plan there as well. And you figure Sajazi could be that, but also you can have Brendan Donovan forever.
Yeah.
Like, it just gives you another option and a guy that, as you try to find clarity through your roster, he can be that
Super
backup plan
utility
anywhere else. Yeah. And
everywhere.
yeah,
Not anywhere. I think he can be the contingency plan literally everywhere.
yeah. No, I do like that. I think Martinez in a flyer, like, or just Kafis is probably enough.
Hey, let's do Martinez and Kafis because I think St. Louis would be interested in adding a guy that was that productive in high A and double last year. Or
Yeah.
was it low and high? I think
Um,
it was mostly high.
it might have been, I know he got to double and I think he slowed down there, but it might have been all three.
CJ Kafis, I'm pulling it up right now. Kafis is 23-year-old, just turned 23 from Boca. He's one of your
Yeah.
guys, Miami Hurricane.
Yeah.
But CJ Kafis, 40 games in Lake County with a 10.15 OPS, 67 in Double A Akron with an 8.36.
Yeah.
So
It's
on
pretty
the
good.
year, 291, 393, 511 with 17 homers, drove in 92 between high A
And,
and double.
and I think the Guardians are aware of the underlying and stuff.
I'm
Probably a
sure.
good opportunity to sell at the highest of his value too.
Perfect. And St. Louis would be willing to add that. So I have it was Ifedi for Angel Martinez and Kafis. What was your Braves idea?
I had Fetty and Michael Ciani to the Braves
Yeah.
for honestly a lesser return. So it probably would be better off that way. Um, they did need to replace a high leverage arm. So I went Daysbel Hernandez, and that's a
Hmm.
guy that you hope can make a leap in high leverage with you there,
Yeah.
and helps. Drew Hackenberg,
Hmm.
who's obviously a really solid arm that I don't think the Braves would want to move particularly,
I
but in this spot would be a good arm to get. And then Ellison Joseph, who was unselected in the Rule 5 draft, but a guy that I think is disgusting and
so
could be fast tracked to their bullpen as well.
my only pushback would be I feel like the Cardinals already have 10 Drew Hackenberg.
That's the problem. That's the problem. And that's the problem with trying to match up a trade with the Braves. The Braves actually have, if you need pitching in your organization, the Braves are a great
Yeah.
match for you because
Yeah.
they've got a bunch of upper minors arms that they can go to send you. But if you're the Cardinals, like, they don't need that many more guys like that. So that's the problem with it. So I agree. I think we roll with the trade to the Guardians.
Cool. Um, Another one that jumped out to me, and I mentioned this to Peter, and he was really fired up about it. Jojo Romero, his value is as high as I think it'll get at this point. His slider is one of the better pitches, I think, in baseball out of a non closer reliever. He would be a good fit for New York, who needs a lefty and could use that slider. I thought Jojo Romero for Everson Pereira could be like, fuck it, why not? Let's try him in our outfield.
Well, they got Brennan Davis now, honestly, so I do think that that could make Everson Pereira a little bit more expensive. It sounds crazy, but they're not that different. They've always been hurt. A lot of power, and I think that there's a better chance that Brennan Davis makes an impact for the Yankees in a pinch this coming year than Everson Pereira. Unfortunately, a guy who I've liked is just
Yeah.
between the injuries and the swing and miss. It's just like at least Brennan. I think I've seen him get into it a little bit more in
Yeah.
AAA at points. And we'll see, but I think they're kind of the Spider-Man meme to a degree.
I'm just looking at this outfield, and like obviously Siani is the center field depth to Victor Scott, but it's Nootbaar and Jordan Walker in the corners, and then it's Burleson, who's probably going to be the DH on an everyday basis, and then it's Kaperniak and Valade. I'd rather run Everson Pereira out there for intrigue alone.
Yep. No doubt. No doubt. And just gives you a righty though that you can just kind of add to the fold here. And if it clicks, man, like he hits absolute bombs. Like he
Yeah,
has crazy power. It's plus raw. But yeah, it's just another guy to add into the fold there.
yeah,
I also think it would if he looks decent, give you the opportunity to if Newport kind of breaks through a little bit this year, I mean, that's a guy you should trade. There's not a lot of controllable left-handed hitting outfield bats that can play all three spots.
right.
You could get a haul for Lars Nootbaar, and what's he doing for you with a 780 OPS, even if it's an 820 OPS this coming season? By the time he is set to hit free agency, that'll be right around when I think the this core and this new looked Cardinals will probably be closer to competing. Then what?
Yeah.
I would really consider moving him, but it doesn't sound like they're going to.
Yeah. So let's hold off on moving Nootbaar right now, but the final thing with St. Louis is Arenado. Where you want to send him? I'm open to anything. Yankees, Angels, where are we going?
I had him to the Angels for Sammy Natera,
Perfect.
Denzer Guzman, and Capri Ortiz.
I
But
haven't heard of the last two, and the only reason I know the first one is because he balled out in the fall league.
he was gross, honestly. And guys who ball out in the fall league tend to be parts of trade packages in the offseason. I, I mean, that would be with the Angels taking on the majority of the money, and that's what the
Right.
Angels would have to leverage here is, hey, we are willing to do that. Again, I think it opens up things for the Angels because then you can try Rendon at second base a little bit until he inevitably gets hurt or just
Yeah.
doesn't want to play, and then Christian Moore comes up then, and you move Renhefo, which I'll get to in a little bit, but that also frees up $9 million as well. So I could see that, but I also think the Yankees the more exciting move, and just trying to think about what the Yankees could do to address third base. Otherwise, they might just have to settle for. It's crazy to say settle for that, but
Settle
like
for
they might
Nolan
have to
Arenado.
settle with corner infielders of Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, and you know what? I might be a little bit more confident in acquiring a Nolan Arenado and having him, bounce back
Yeah.
offensively when he can play opposite to Paul Goldschmidt, when he's joining a clubhouse with Aaron Judge and Cody Bellinger, who's also been very focused on trying to bounce back a little bit more this year and be more
Yeah.
offensively productive. Like there's a lot of big names there, and I think it'd be a great spot for him to land.
Yeah.
And for the Yankees, like they don't need him to be prime Nolan Arenado. If he's a 110 WRC plus, which I think he is going to get into that power a little bit more with the short porch, both in both corners, he does pull the ball in the air well.
Yeah.
A heck of a lot better option than Oswaldo Cabrera slash DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah.
So I am cool with going with the Yankees if that's the better overall move.
With the Yanks, would it be like a Carlos Legrand?
That's the
Probably,
thing is
like
like
not
yeah, they're
much
not gonna
more
have
than
much.
that.
They're not gonna have just much interest in Will Warren. Is it a
Will Warren is Michael McGreevy, is Gordon Graceffo. They're all the same guy.
correct? Correct. Is it a Ben Rice?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes to that in a heartbeat if I were St. Louis.
Like Ben Rice would be a good get for them and a guy that's like just kind of blocked, right? I mean, I don't really see a path to him getting ABs anytime soon. And is that a guy that the Yankees are really going to roll with even next year after Goldie's gone? I mean, he is a good backup plan
Yeah.
for what they've got going on, but like TJ LeMahieu is that backup plan at least. So
Yeah.
I could see them preferring to hang on to him, but that could be a guy that you dangle. It's not a good farm system. So
No.
if it's not a good farm system, like you should try to trade from some of the guys that have kind of graduated or are in those upper minors types of roles that have been back and forth a little bit. I think a Ben Rice who can play some first, who can also catch for you.
Yeah,
They're gonna eventually move Wilson Contreras, I'd imagine. So like
I would think so.
I would imagine. I think he has a no trade clause as well, right? Which is what puts a little bit of a difficult wrinkle into this.
I
But I
think
think
so.
if they're in full rebuild and he's just chilling at first base, like that is a guy that I do think they could ultimately want to move. It's also a guy that could end up playing more DH for you. Um, and also if Burleson, if that's a guy that you want to move, then Ben Rice can kind of plug in there. It does feel like there's a little bit of redundancy with like Ben Rice and Alec Burleson though.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it
that's my
does.
it's like what can the Yankees put together trade package wise to it doesn't have to be much, so I guess they could do it.
No, I think he can be two lower level pitchers. Like I think he can be guys that are volatile that you may really not like, but that just gets it done for the sake of the money. By the way, Nolan Arenado or sorry, Wilson Contreras, full no trade through the end of the 2026 season, and then 2027, it's a 10 team no trade list.
Got it.
So
Okay. So that's probably when we'll see him move, or he'll be more willing to waive it
waive
maybe
it.
later in the year. Things always change. It's always a fluid situation there. And maybe in the right situation he'll do that. Uh, yeah. So what are we going with here? We're gonna go. I like the Legrand Hay. I like the Legrand Hay shout. Far off project, but could be an absolute dog.
Yeah,
If it comes together for you. And then what? I mean, you can just
somebody
pick a
else,
couple
man.
flyers in there.
Yeah. How does Cam Schlitter sound?
Cam Schlitter. He had a good year.
Yeah, he
He
did.
had a good year.
120 innings at a 3.36.
Yeah, I think either Cam Schlitter
Kyle
and
Carr.
then Kyle Carr on a bounce back. Like even though he wasn't bad, I think he was a popular breakout candidate and just didn't quite break out.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe
and
Rock
he's a little bit
Ratio.
left. He's a little bit different further off. Like yeah, not just an upper minors guy immediately.
Yeah.
So I think LeGrand and Kyle Carr is probably pretty good.
Let's do it. Legrand and Kyle Carr for Nolan Arenado.
That's crazy. Is that enough?
I think so. With
If
that
they're
money,
eating it like the majority of it, yeah.
yeah, what a fall. God, that sucks. What a
Yeah.
fall for the St. Louis Cardinals, too. Sorry, you guys probably had a terrible time listening to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
But the system got better. They have some fun young pieces.
yep. And you
And
got
you know
G.
what?
You,
I actually think that a Cardinals team with the direction's at least a little bit more refreshing. You can see Jordan Walker get regular at bat. See if Mason Wynn can make that leap now
yep.
to being that like a fringe all-star. Just be able to see Ivan Herrera actually catch consistently. This guy's done nothing but perform when he's at the big league level. But when they were ragdolling Wilson Contreras, he was by default also getting ragdolled. And also Wilson Contreras at first base. I think is we're going to get into our top tens. I think he might be a top five first baseman in the game.
There we
But
go.
offensively, he's an animal.
Yeah, he
You know,
is.
140 WRC plus before getting hurt. So, I mean, he's going to mash too. And if he's really, really mashing, he might have a little bit more eagerness to go play for a contender as well. And more teams are going to have some eagerness to trade for him. So, I think there's still a lot to look forward to with this Cardinals team. I want to see these young pitchers too, man. Like this has kind of been needed. I hate the payroll being the reason why. I
Yeah.
almost would have rather have them lied to us and just said, "Hey, we need some roster clarity. We have a lot of young guys, several that are now clogging the 40 men that we need to see what we got with them."
Right.
I want to see Tink Hence, who's going to be on the 40. Like I want to see what he can do. I want to see what TK Roby when healthy can do. Like I want to see what even Michael McGreevy, he showed well in the big leagues. Like let's
Yeah,
give him some innings now instead of Miles Michaelis. McGreevy could be Michaelis on the minimum.
for
So
sure.
like I want to see what these young guys can do. And I think finally we're going to get a chance to do that. Now I don't want them to just sit and be in rebuild for 5 years. They don't need to do that. They're already further along. They're already in like phase like year 3 or 4 of a 5 year presumed rebuild
Right.
just because of the talent that they have, even though they weren't quote unquote rebuilding.
Right.
But they need a year to just sort shit out and see what they've got.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, and this is a good opportunity for them to do that. We're going to get to a team that we really want to contend bad in a moment. Before that, one more quick break. Let's talk about the Seattle Mariners, the team that boasts the best starting rotation in Major League Baseball, but they leave so much to be desired offensively. This one is a bit more cut and dry with one major caveat. The major caveat comes to us from Adam Jude at the Seattle Times. He reported that they have a spending budget after their slew of non tenders of approximately $16 million. Okay, so you can increase the budget. You can increase the payroll on players by $16 million. Know that. Final 2024 number is $144 million. The estimate in 2025 as it stands right now is 146. Transactions so far. They acquired Austin Shenton from Tampa for cash. They claimed Nick Raposo off waivers from Toronto. They signed Junior Marte and Josh Fleming, two relievers, to minor league deals. They declined the club option on Jorge Polanco. Justin Turner, Jimmy Garcia, Luis Urias all hit free agency. They non-tendered JT Chagua, Austin Voth, Sam Haggerty, and Josh Rojas. The big question, are you trading Luis Castillo or no? I'm not.
I don't want to, man. It just doesn't make sense, especially at this stage where the the, the options are kind of limited. You're gonna force a Luis Castillo trade. That's the kind of move that you only make if it's something that you just can't turn down, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a bat with control that you're able to add, and it's just like, man, you don't get to add a bat like this very often. I think the Casas conversation was definitely one of them where you could say, hey, this is a opportunity where you get to add a bat that you don't get to add very often. They weren't able to match it up, and if that's not happening, which I think it would have happened by now if it was, especially with the Red Sox kind of being able to address other things already now, anyways.
Right.
I don't see the point of forcing a trade of a really talented arm when you have the what could be the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah, and was last year and could very well be again. Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, Wu, Miller. I am not breaking that up whatsoever. The offense is where there's a lot to be desired. Catcher, I'm not touching. It's Raleigh, Garver slash Raposo as the backup. You assume Garver and Mitch Haniger are going to split the DH spot. That Haniger deal looks so bad right now.
Looks really bad. And that's the thing is like, I wonder how much of I'm talking about building a good farm system. Jerry DePoto is another guy that can absolutely do
Yes.
that. But I wonder how much of the ownership apprehension is the fact that when DePoto has spent over the last couple of years, it hasn't been good.
Right.
And I wonder if that's part of the reason why. Like it's not just the deal for Mitch Haniger. Like it's been a few contracts here where I think even the JP Crawford extension was a little bit like, oh, okay, we're gonna do that right now. With his kind of ups and downs and injury history at points. Like, I mean, you look at Mitch Garver, Mitch Haniger, both Mitch deals, not great. I'm happy for Victor Robles. Very reactionary extension there too. Could
Oh
end
my
up
God.
being good value. Would you be surprised at all if Victor Robles returns next year and has an 85 WRC plus?
Not in the slightest. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a 75 WRC plus.
So like, there's a lot of those weird moves. So I can understand to a degree. I don't think it's justifiable. Like spend, you have a rotation, but maybe that's part of the reason why there's not as much of the green light to spend
Yeah.
than maybe what we thought. Even just taking on some of the Polanco money was a good shot, didn't work. So
Yeah.
I think that might be how ownership sees it.
Yeah, I think there are some clear-cut deficiencies offensively, and that has come from spending, not irresponsibly, but just spending on the wrong guys. Again, want to remind you, we have $16 million to play with. We had a trade when we were playing GM for the Padres that we thought was right, and it was moving a rise to Seattle for Emerson, Hancock, and Dylan Moore. You still want to do that?
Yeah, I think for multiple reasons. One, he can play first base for you, but two, he could play second base for you, and you,
Yeah,
you need him to kind of do both. I think this kind of hybrid of it gives you the opportunity to see what you got. If Haniger can come alive a little bit or Garver can come alive a little bit, then those guys take the DH spot. If not, then you can throw him in the DH spot too,
yeah,
and DFA one of those guys or figure out or just relegate them to more of a bench role. Or worst case scenario, you compromise some defenses second base
yeah.
and you roll with Arias out there. I don't think that the Mariners are in a position here where they can just sit there and say like, "Hey, we got to find the perfect fit and find a great defender." I'd rather have Arias, I think, than Gavin Lux, depending on the cost of acquisition of Gavin Lux. But obviously, I'm a little bit lower on Lux. I don't think he's going to have. I don't think
Yeah.
he's going to continue the second half that he had. But I do think for the cost financially, like Lux is only expected to make a couple million, comes with control, things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, if the cost prospect wise isn't a lot, that could make a lot of sense too, because Arias's anticipated $10 million final year of arbitration does eat into that budget pretty quickly.
So, ¿por qué no los dos? in the words of the old El Paso Taco Girl. It's like, why not Arise at first and Lux at second? Because I had them going to acquire both.
So then you move Luke Raley to DH,
Yeah,
and then Haniger bench
yeah.
slash what DFA. um,
Rayleigh and Garver split DH. Haniger, like, he's a bench guy. He plays 60 games, 70 games this year.
okay, yeah,
Um, I would be so Arise for Dylan Moore and Hancock. Dylan Moore's estimated about 3.9. Hancock is making the minimum, which is 800. So that gets you to 4.7. You are net positive $9 million taking on Arise because he's owed about 13.7. So let's call it $9 million you just added. You've got $7 million to work with. Lux, the estimate for him in year two of arbitration is $2.7 million. And like, I mean, you mentioned the offensive uptick. If it's too much prospect wise, I stay away and I'm cool with a rise there. But I thought, like, would the Dodgers entertain Samad Taylor and Ashton Izzy, or is that way too light?
it's probably too light
Okay.
because he's just so cheap. And
Yeah.
what and I know that the Dodgers are going to lean into that second half thing there as well.
Yeah.
Would you also like? Why not just go sign Jose Iglesias?
How much is that?
I don't think it's more than a couple $1 million. Maybe it's five. I why is Jose Iglesias still on the market?
I don't. He should be a Met by now. But if he's not a Met, like if he's not a Met right now, he probably won't be a Met at all. So I could be in on that.
Like he has space to work with in the outfield there, where I think he's just going to spray the ball all over.
Yeah.
I think again it depends if you would rather. I mean, Iglesias would probably be a 1 year deal, right? Where you're getting control with a Gavin Lux. Who would you rather have?
I think if we're getting a rise, I'd rather have Iglesias if he's not that expensive. If he's $4 million, I'd rather do that.
Yeah. But the thing with Lux is, you're getting a little bit more thump, but
Yeah.
not a ton. Like he had 10 home runs in 140 games, and now you're putting him in Seattle. Like if he hits 7 home runs, that's I'd rather just have Jose Iglesias hitting a high 200s and just scrapping ABs, like just being scrappy and difficult. Like that's the thing with the Mariners. I think their biggest issue at points was if you look at the cumulative offensive numbers, they weren't that bad, which is shocking. It was just the inconsistency and it was the struggles to come through with runners in scoring position and move runners over and do all those little things. They tried the like grab some sluggers and see what happens thing, volatile side of it by signing a Garver and trading for a Jorge Polanco and trading for Luke Raley, who did swing it well, but like that kind of blew up in their face. I think you've got enough power here with Rodriguez, with Raleigh, with Raley, like with Arozarena.
Yeah.
I think there's enough pop there where I think you need to lean into bat to ball scrappiness and that whole drill. And I almost would rather, yeah, go Iglesias on a free agent deal. I have no idea how much that's going to be for,
Well,
and then going to get Arias.
and I prefer that because in trading Dylan Moore in this Arise deal, you pretty much clear up third base entirely. So you don't have an answer there. And Iglesias was playing third base for New York last year at point. So like I do see that as
Yeah,
something that makes a bit more sense than like, hey, let's try and shove Gavin Lux at third base. Like that's not going to happen. If Lux
no.
is coming to your team, he's playing second base. That's all he's
Well,
doing.
he's had
And then you got to
throwing issues. Yeah, he
yeah,
had
like
throwing issues.
and
And,
then it's like, okay, Austin Shenton is playing third base. Ben Williamson, who I know they want to debut in 2025, is playing third base. I'm good on that.
yeah, I'm with you. And the thing is that Mariners fans might be listening to this and saying, well, we can't trade Dylan Moore. Like he's the guy that's going to plug in for the one of the three spots that we aren't going to address inevitably. I agree, but if you're going to get Arias, I'd imagine the Padres like that's how you're going to get it done
Yeah.
because the Padres aren't going to be as interested in I think a further off prospect return or things like that. They're trying to compete. I think that's an essential piece for them, especially after moving Arias.
Yeah.
I'm giving up Dylan Moore to get Arias if I'm also able to sign, like Jose Iglesias as well. I loved being able to pick up Austin Shenton. I thought that was actually some great infield depth for them,
Yeah.
just general depth for them.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's going to stink, and that is a guy that you plug into another spot, but I think it's worth it if you're able to also go get an Iglesias there too, who can plug into third and be fine there as well.
And like, why are you drawing the line at Dylan Moore if all you're asking for is a guy that comes with some offensive notoriety and a beating heart offensively? This guy is
Yeah,
winning batting titles at will in Luis
yeah,
Ariz. And how
yeah.
valuable is that? That's for you to decide. But you're asking for them to try and upgrade offensively. They're taking on $9 million on an offensive upgrade, and Luis Ariz is objectively a better offensive player than Dylan Moore is.
Yeah, and I think just again getting on base and just being able to like set the tone was
Making
a
something
big challenge
happen,
for them.
yeah, in front of Cal. Like that is a leadoff guy, or he's your two hitter with Julio batting leadoff. Like there are options here, and that is a top third of the order of a Rise, Julio, Cal, and then Randy Arozarena there too. That is a hell of a lot better than like, oh, is Dylan Moore hitting second today?
And I think that was a big part of their problem, right? Like
Yeah,
I kind of want Julio in a position to drive in runs
yeah,
more, and I want I want guys setting the table for that's a pretty decent middle of the order. Like those are some
yeah,
guys that can swing it, man. Like
yeah,
and I know that they've kind of moved Julio through different spots, especially as he, did well and then struggled. And I think they mostly settled on him in the two hole. But I'm just maybe he would be more comfortable in the four hole. I would like to just kind of see where he's at in position to try to drive in runs. But yeah, I think it just gives them more options to do different things. And Rowley's going to hit homers, man. Like,
yep.
and that's something that you'd love to see him do more of with guys on base. And I think on base was a big part of the problem for them last year.
And Rayleigh's going to hit homers too, man. So like, set yourself up to get to Raleigh and Rayleigh and possibly Julio and possibly a Rosarena with men on base, and you do that with a Rise, and you do that at the top of the order. So I like that idea. Where in Emerson Hancock, for the sake of this, if you didn't hear our Padre conversation, Logan Evans is passing up Hancock by spring training. Like
Yeah,
there's no room for Hancock to make another start in a
no,
Mariners uniform.
no. And there's I think there's more upside than what Hancock has shown. If you can say healthy, his velo is still down from where it was at in college. But
Yeah,
Logan Evans is a guy that with his arsenal, I'm so confident that if the Mariners needed to throw someone into the five spot, his ability to get ground balls and get swings and misses and
yeah,
fill up the zone enough with a really deep bag of pitches, that's your contingency plan right there. Like he's going to be very solid for you. And they got
yeah,
some other guys that all of a sudden are starting to emerge and not far off either. So yeah, I think you're very comfortable moving a Hancock in a situation like that. But he also is a nice buy low and pitching depth option for the Padres on top of getting a much needed just versatile bat because we
yeah,
talk about there's no starker difference between top of the lineup and bottom of the lineup than what you got
right.
going on right now in San Diego. So I think it's great for all parties and it kind of clears the runway for Logan Evans, a guy who they had working out of the bullpen in the middle of the season to preserve his innings in anticipation of a potential debut last year.
Yeah,
So that just shows you how high they are on him. I think it also shows you how high they are on him when they assigned him straight to Double A, if I'm not mistaken, like right out of camp, despite being not a day one pick. Like they are already very very high on this guy, and
yeah.
and I think that makes Hancock even more expendable.
Yep. So we traded a Rise to San Diego for Dylan Moore and Hancock. We're signing Iglesias 1 year for four. Does that sound right? That sounds right to me.
Yeah, 1 year for four with some incentives that can bring it up to six.
Okay, so let's call it four as a baseline, and that's what they're looking at in their budget, and they're happy to pay the additional two if the incentives hit because they got a good baseball player. So net nine for a Rise, and then four for Iglesias. That gives us $3 million to play with. Do you see any other deficiency?
I'd like to address the bullpen a little bit more,
I want to
but
add one reliever. Yeah,
they're really good about it. Like that's something that they do identify arms well in there, and they do seem to do a pretty good job of just filling the bullpen, economically.
right.
Matt Brash should be back at some point at the
I,
end of the
I
season.
think mid-season, Gregory Santos was hurt the entire year, and he was not good for those 10 innings or whatever he threw. So like Gregory Santos is back. He's fine. Colin Snyder was amazing. Munoz is Munoz. Like I want to add a guy for $2 million, 1 year,
I
two
want a
million
low
dollars.
budget bounce back guy.
Jorge Lopez. Can I point you in that direction?
That's a good bounce back guy. I just want another iron in the fire. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Lopez Leclerc's probably still going to command more money.
So the guys in that budget, in the $1 to $3 million budget that I was looking at in terms of bounce back, Karinchak's a funny name that I keep wanting to bring up, but I don't think he and Seattle Washington jive too well. Jorge Lopez, Adam Simber, who was brutal last year, but it's a funky slot, and maybe they can optimize an older Adam Simber now, and then Tyler Matzik off of injury and then build back. Like Jorge Lopez and Matzik were the two sexiest names for me in that group.
Yeah, and Matic may be out of their price range.
You think he's four?
I think he might be more than that. He's
Really?
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It's
I
so
think
hard with these
Atlanta
relievers.
declined 5.5 on him.
Did they really?
I thought so.
Wow, it's kind of crazy. Uh, I say we take a shot on Jorge Lopez. I'm trying to see like a lot of
Anybody
these other
else?
relievers are just going to be a little expensive.
Yeah.
A little expensive. Do we have a reunion with Trevor Gott,
I'd so much rather have Lopez, who like
Hector
actually looked
Neris?
kind of decent. I think Neris is still worth more than that somehow. Like I could see
Yeah,
Neris getting 1 year five.
I mean, yeah, I could see that just off of what he's done in the past.
Jorge Lopez, like I think the whole Mets unceremonious end will like tank his price a little bit, but he did finish 26 and two-thirds innings at a 2.03 ERA with the
Yeah, he's
Cubs.
pretty gross for Chicago. Yeah, I like Jorge Lopez. I think that's a good get.
And I think you can get him for 2.5 on 1 year.
Let's do it. Maybe
Let's
it's a
do it.
little bit more. Okay, they'll push past the budget by a million or two. Like, get over it.
I think they can be fine. So we just signed Jorge Lopez, Jose Iglesias, and we traded for Luis Ariz. So the new look Seattle Mariners starting rotation stays the same. Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, Wu, Miller. Logan Evans is the six whenever he's ready. The bullpen now. Andres Munoz, Colin Snyder, Gregory Santos, Jorge Lopez, Trent Thornton, Taylor Saucedo, Carlos Vargas, Troy Taylor, and of course you just signed Junior Marte and Josh Fleming on minor league deals. And the new look offense. Catching is Cal Raleigh, Mitch Garver, and Nick Raposo. You've got a rise at first base with Locklear as the backup plan. You probably run out Ryan Bliss or Samad Taylor at second base, or you've got Iglesias at second base. You got JP at short. Then it's probably Iglesias at third with Shenton as his backup, and then the outfield is Arozarena, Julio, Robles slash Canzone slash Cade Marlowe slash Haniger,
Don't
and
sleep on
Rayleigh's your
Canzone.
DH.
There's some interesting batted ball markers with him if he can just stay healthy and put it together. Also, did you mention the bullpen edition that was that broken by Just Baseball, Drew Pomerantz?
Drew Pomerantz was a minor league free agent
Yes.
signing. Was he a non-roster invite? I didn't see the NRI next to him.
Yeah, because I don't think I reported that part of it.
Oh,
Yeah, he is a non-roster invitee.
you
Should
should
I
just
follow
you
up on
should
that?
tweet that. Yeah, you should
Yeah.
just quote tweet it and say, by the
I
way,
didn't know at the
he's an
time.
invite.
I didn't know at the time, and I was too excited when I saw his name. I was like, no way! Like this is a guy. Like we got Pomerantz signing another deal. Um,
Awesome.
that one might have popped as much as any random minor league free agent
Just because
deal that
people
we
remember the
reported on.
Anderson Espinoza trade. Like that's all they remember it for.
When he's been on the field, he still looks decent. He's funky enough from the left side. We'll see if he can. He said in his own words, he wants to go out, with a good taste in his mouth, essentially, like, just go out on a positive note.
Cool.
See if he can do it.
Why not? I think that's a better Mariners team.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah,
that's
100%. And then hopefully some of these young guys get closer to being able to contribute, and
yep,
offensively.
yep.
See if someone can make a leap sooner rather than later.
That's where we at. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Every link you need is in the episode description, and we'll be back to talk to you on Wednesday with two more teams. It'll be me and Peter. Talk to you guys.